Hello, it's Paige Green at Paige Green's Tutoring, and today is video 6 in simultaneous equations. This is the last video on simultaneous equations and will just be focusing on knowledge for higher students. So if you are foundation, feel free to watch this, but you do not need to know it for your GCSE exams. So this video is going to focus on solving simultaneous equations again. However, this time we've got one linear equation and one quadratic equation. So we can't use what we did before where we're trying to eliminate, because this time there's some quadratics involved. What we do instead is we use a method called substitution, which I'm going to go over with you today. Now with this one, what I will do is I'll show you an example, let you have a go, and we're going to go through 3 examples and you'll be able to at each stage have a go at a question on your own. So this first one, it says y equals x plus 3 and y equals x squared plus 3x. Now to solve this, what we can say is y is equal to this, but y also equals this here. So in order to solve this, what we can do is we can say, well, those two things must therefore be equal. So we've essentially substituted this y, we know y equals that, into its place here. Now let's have a look at solving it. In order to solve this, because we've got a quadratic involved, we need to set it equal to 0. So let's have a go at doing this. First of all, let's get the x's onto one side. So I'm going to take x away from both sides. So I'm going to have x squared plus 2. So I've just got rid of this x here. Next, I'm going to get rid of that 3. So I'm going to take that away from both sides. So I'm going to get left with x squared plus 2x minus 3. Now, in order to solve this, we're going to have to factorise. So we need to look for two numbers that multiply together to give us negative 3, but add together to give us positive 2. Now, if you think about it, 3 and negative 1 is going to times to give us negative 3, but those two factors would add together to give us positive 2. So that means in our brackets, we're going to get x plus 3 and x minus 1. Now to solve this, we set both brackets equal to 0. So I'm going to have x plus 3 equals 0 and x minus 1 equals 0. Therefore, x must equal minus 3, or x could equal 1. Now you can see on these questions we're getting 2 answers, which means in total, once we've found our y's, we're going to get 4 answers. Now to find out what y is, we can just substitute it into either equation. I'm going to go for the top one just because it's a little bit simpler. So y equals x, which is minus 3 here, plus 3. Now that means y would equal 0. And here, y could equal x, which is 1 plus 3, which means y could also equal 4. So here, our answers are x equals minus 3 or x equals 1, and y equals 0 or y equals negative 4. What I would like you to do is use this example to have a go at the question on the screen. Pause the video, have a go, and press play when you're ready to go through the answer. Now these equations are very similar to what we did before. We know what y equals in both cases, so we can just set them equal to each other. So I've got x squared plus 3x is equal to x plus 15. And we can go ahead and get everything on one side. So first of all, I'm going to get rid of that x by taking it away from both sides. And then making it equal to 0, I'm going to take that 15 away from both sides. So you should get x squared plus 2x minus 15. Now when you factorise this, you should get x plus 5 and x minus 3. As 5 times minus 3 gives us negative 15, but 5 take away 3 gives us positive 2. And then to solve this, you should set both brackets equal to 0, meaning that your x would have equaled minus 5 and your x could have equaled 3. Now to solve this fully, we need to find out what y is. So I'm just going to pick that first one. So you could have minus 5 plus 15, which would give you 10, or you could have 3 plus 15, which would give you 18. So your answers here are x equals minus 5 or 3, and y equals 10 or 18. Let's have a look at another example. Here I have y equals x plus 1, and then I've got x squared plus y squared equals 13. Now we're going to use a similar idea to what we did before. We know that y equals x plus 1. So instead of saying y here, what I can do is substitute in x plus 1 instead. Now it's a little bit harder with the substitution, but let's go through it together. So we've got x squared plus, now instead of y, I'm going to say x plus 1, and that is squared, and that's going to equal 13. So now let's expand our bracket out. We're going to get x squared plus 1x, which is 2x, plus 1, which equals 13. Now let's get everything on one side so it equals 0. So I'm going to take that 13 away from both sides. And now let's simplify what we have. Well, I've got 2x squared, so I can say 2x squared. And then I've got the 2x here. And then I've got 1 take away 13, which is negative 12. Now again, we have a quadratic that we've got to solve, whereas it is a little bit harder because we've got a coefficient. So what we have to do here to solve this quadratic is first times your a and your c together, which gives you negative 24. So instead of looking for two numbers that times together to give us negative 12 and add together to give us 2, we're looking for two numbers that times together to give us negative 24, but add together to give us 2. Could you have a little think about that? What do you think the two numbers we're going to look at? So you should have got that we would use 6x and 4x. Now instead of putting this in our brackets, we're using those two numbers to split the middle. So this is a method you should be familiar with already. If you're not, have a little look into splitting in the middle before continuing on with this question. Now we're going to split this down here. So we're going to factorise this first side. So I can take out 2x, and then we're going to have x plus 3. And then I'm going to factorise this second side. So I've got a negative 4 in common there. And then I've got an x plus 3. And we can tell that we've done that correct because in the brackets we've got the same. So that means our factorised form is going to be 2x minus 4 and x plus 3. Now to solve this, setting each bracket equal to 0. So we should get x equals 2 and x equals negative 3. And finally, to get our y values as well, we're going to substitute it into this top equation. So y could equal 2 plus 1, which is 3, or y could equal negative 3 plus 1, which is negative 2. So our answers are going to be x is 2 and y is 3, or x is negative 3, and y is negative 2. Now, using this, could you have a go at that second question for me? Okay, again, very similar method that we're going to follow for this. Instead of y, we're going to put 2x plus 1. So let's have a look at what it's going to look like. We've got x squared, and then instead of y, we're going to have 2x plus 1 squared equals 10. So let's expand our brackets out. So when you expand these, you're going to get 4x squared plus 2x, which is 4x, plus 1. And then I'm going to set that equal to 0 by taking away that 10 from both sides. Now that I've set it equal to 0, let's simplify it down. So you should have got 5x squared plus 4x. And then 1 take away 10 is minus 9. And then to factorise this, remember you're timesing your a and your c first. So that gives you negative 45. So you're looking for two numbers that times together to give us negative 45, but add together to give us 4. And if you do that, you should have got that your two numbers are 9 and 5, with that 5 being negative. So we're going to use that to split it in the middle. And now let's factorise each side. So on this side, we've only got an x in common. So in my brackets, I'm going to get 5x plus 9. Now on this other one, we can see the only thing we've got in common is that negative. So we're going to take out a negative 1. And then again, we've just got 5x plus 9. So if I factorise this full, I'm going to have 5x plus 9 in one bracket and x minus 1 in the other. Now, when you solve this, you should have set both brackets equal to 0. So you should have got an answer of x equals minus 9 over 5 and x equals 1. Now, to finish this, you might have picked this equation to substitute into just because it looks a little bit easier. So let's have a go. So y equals 2 lots of negative 9 over 5 plus 1. Or we could have y equals 2 lots of 1 plus 1. So when we've got 2 lots of negative 9, that is going to give me negative 18 over 5. And then instead of saying plus 1, I'm going to change that to 5 over 5 just so it's easier. So there, my final answer is y equals negative 13 over 5. This one's a little bit easier. 2 times 1 is just 2. Add on 1 gives us 3. So your answers here is x equals negative 9 over 5 and y equals negative 13 over 5. Or x is 1 and y is 3. Now let's go through one last one, and this is the hardest one out of them all. So again, I'm going to go through this one as an example before you have a go at that one. You can see previously we've had y equals something, but here it's not as simple as that. What we've got to do is rearrange this first equation before we begin. So what I can see here, this is the equation I know I'm going to substitute into because it's a bit too hard to kind of rearrange when we've got that square value. I can see I've got two values of y and then I've just got an x there. So in this case, it's actually going to be easier. If I make this x equals, I can then just substitute it in here. So let's have a go first rearranging this first equation. Well, I'm going to take away that 3y from both sides. So I'm going to get 2x equals 5 minus 3y. And then I've got to divide it by 2. So I'm going to get that x equals 5, take away 3y, over 2. So that's my x value that I can use to substitute into this second equation. Let's have a look what's going to happen when we do this. Now first we've just got that 2y squared, and then instead of x we've got our 5 minus 3y over 2, and we're going to times that by y, and that equals 12. So let's times that by y to start off with. So that 2y squared is still the same. Now if I times it by y, everything on the top is going to be multiplied by y. So that 5 becomes a 5y, and the 3y becomes a 3y squared. And that is over. It's a little bit tricky to solve because we've got a fraction here. But what we can do is, let's make it equal to 0 first. So we've got what we've got here so far, but let's just bring that 12 over just so it's equal to 0. Now that it's equal to 0, what I can do is I can times this by 2 to get rid of my fraction. But when you timed it by 2, you've got to be really careful that you do absolutely everything times 2. So 2y squared times 2 is 4y squared. All of that times 2 just gets rid of the fraction. And then minus 12 times 2 is negative 24. Now that we have this, we can go ahead and simplify this by collecting those like terms. So I've got 4y squared take away 3y squared. So that's just y squared. I've got that 5y on its own and the negative 24 there. Now we can go ahead and factorise this to solve it. So looking for two numbers that times together to give us minus 24, but add together to give us 5. That's going to be 8 and 3. So you can see it's a little bit of an easier equation to solve. That means when we set our brackets equal to 0, I'm going to get y equals negative 8 and y equals 3. Now we're not done there yet. Remember, we have to find our x. So picking any of the equations, I'm going to go for this one just because it's a little bit easier to deal with. So I've got 2x plus 3 lots of y, which could be negative 8, and that is equal to 5. Now if I do 3 lots of negative 8, that's going to give me negative 24. And then if I solve this, I'm going to add that 24 to both sides, which gives me 29. And then divide both sides by 2, so I get 29 over 2. Now with the other one, I know that y could equal 3. So I've got 3 lots of 3 equal 5. 3 lots of 3 is just 9. Getting rid of that 9 from both sides, I'm going to take it away, so I get left with negative 4. And then dividing by that 2 last of all. So our answers here are y equals negative 8, and x equals 29 over 2, or y equals 3 and x is negative 2. Now, like I said, a little bit of a trickier one here. With this one, you've got, have a go at first rearranging and then substituting in. Have a go and play when you're ready to go over your answer. With this one, I'm going to decide to make y equals, just because it's a little bit easier to do. All I need to do is take away that negative 2x. Now, if you made it equal to x, that's absolutely fine. Just keep following through, checking your answers as we go. So now that I know that y equals 11 minus 2x, I can substitute it into this second equation. So let's have a look. I've got x, and then instead of y, I'm going to say 11 minus 2x, and that is equal to 15. Now, if I times this together, I'm going to get 11x minus 2x squared equals 15. Instead of bringing that 15 over, I'm going to instead take it over to get rid of that negative. So I'm going to add that 2x onto the other side, but take away the 11. So you're going to end up with 2x squared minus 11x plus 15. So like I said, I've just added on that 2x squared to both sides and then taken away that 11x from both sides. Now to solve this, you do need to times your a and c first, which gives us 30. So thinking of two numbers that times together to give us 30, but add together to give us negative 11, well, that would actually be negative 6 and negative 5. So we can use that to split in the middle. Now drawing our little line and factorising here, so we've got a 2x in common. So my brackets would just be x minus 3. And here I've got a negative 5 in common. And then I've got x minus 3 here. So when I fully factorise this, I've got 2x minus 5 in one bracket and x minus 3 in the other. So that means when we're solving and setting both of the brackets equal to 0, you should have got x equals 5 over 2 or x equals 3. Now substituting that into one of the equations, I'm going to go for this just because it's going to be a bit easier to deal with. So I've got 2 lots of x, which is 5 over 2, plus y equals 11. Well, that's going to be 5 plus y equals 11, so y would equal 6. And then here I've got 2 lots of x, which is 3, plus y equals 11. So it's going to be 6 plus y equals 11, so y could equal 3. So my answers here would be x equals 5 over 2 and y equals 6, or x equals 3 and y equals 5. So that's the final video within our simultaneous equations series. I hope you found that useful. Now, like I said, this is tricky, so I would recommend going off and keep practicing this, trying a few different questions, because practice makes perfect. I hope you enjoyed this video and I look forward to seeing you in the next set of videos.